Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Oh, the Places You'll Work. We're very excited today to have Jorge Peraza-Vasquez on the show. Jorge is a 2014 graduate of San Francisco State. He's a longtime Bay Area guy. He's first in his family to go to college, which is very impressive in itself. He's had a series of cool internships from Morgan Stanley to 21st Century Brand. And that is actually where he started his current job. He is a program manager at 21st Century Brand, but he was able to parlay an internship into a full-time job as program manager. And 21st Century Brand does branding for some really big name clients that you surely know, places like Fox Sports, HBO Max, Instacart, and LinkedIn. So welcome, Jorge. We're excited to hear stories and a little bit about your backstory.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you for meeting with us today. We know you have so much information that you've learned over the years, and we just want to take that information and learn from you and just learn about everything, all of your experiences. So we'll just get right into our rapid fire Q&A that we start off in our podcasts. So these are just like one-word answers. We want to get to know you a little bit better and more personal. First question is, what are you surprisingly good at?
Oh, what am I surprisingly good at? Editing TikTok videos really quickly. I can get you a vlog in like 30 minutes.
Oh, that's a talent. That's a talent. What are you surprisingly bad at?
Dancing, for sure.
What's an insecurity of yours?
I think small talk. I always feel like I can get a little bit awkward.
And one thing on your bucket list?
I want to live in a different country for at least a year.
Oh, I love that. A bad habit of yours?
Going to bed really late. It'll be like 1, 2 a.m. and I'm still up for no reason.
And lastly, if you could have any job on earth, what would it be and why?
Any job. Okay, this is going to sound funny though. I would like to have Jesse's job from The Bachelor so I can come in at like the most random points and say, ladies or gentlemen, it's the final roast tonight. You know, like I feel like that's the best job. You get to travel and then you just come in, here and there.
Love it. Love it. So you have a really interesting backstory, and we always like to start with hearing a little bit about your family, your growing up. How did being Latino American and first in your family to go to college impact you? So maybe just start with just the basics, like where you grew up and what's your family like?
Sure. So I'm a native to the Bay Area. I grew up in East Palo Alto, and my parents were both immigrants from El Salvador. And so I lived with both of my parents and my brother growing up. And one thing that was really special for me when I think about my upbringing is that even though I lived in a town that was incredibly dangerous, my mom always valued education. And the one thing that she always told me, regardless of if she even knew how it was going to happen, if we had any money, was that I was going to go to college. Like I heard that throughout, my life growing up. And because of that, I always it wasn't a question if I was going to go, it was a question of when I was going to go. And so I always had that within me. And another interesting thing is that when I was growing up, East Palo Alto was incredibly dangerous. So my parents did not actually let us hang out outside or just hang out with the children around the neighborhood. And so I was really sheltered growing up, and it was an interesting experience because when I was about to go to first grade, my mom actually put me in a lottery program, which allowed students from the East Palo Alto neighborhood to go to school in a more affluent neighborhood. And so the environment in which I grew up in was not really the same as the environment that I was shaped in. So it was a really interesting experience, a really interesting kind of duality of just kind of living in two different worlds and not always feeling like I belonged in either.
We hear over and over again kind of these families that emphasize education and how much that ends up impacting kind of ambitious pathways. So good on your parents. So on a Medium post that you put up online, and granted, I know this was ages ago, you said, I was reminded countless times prior to beginning at SF State that one of the best things I could do for myself while in college was find a great internship. So tell the story of landing the Morgan Stanley Private Wealth Management internship.
I needed to stand out, and internships were going to be the number one way for me to, not only get experience, but learn about what it was like to work in an environment that, none of my family had ever worked in, which is corporate. And the story about my internship at Morgan Stanley is really interesting because it was actually, my mom really helped out a lot, and not in the way that a lot of people would think, like it's usually, oh, my mom has connections. But my mom, for over 20 years now, has been a server at a country club. And, because she's worked there for so long, she just knows a lot of the members really well. And around the time when I was graduating high school, as any proud mom would be, she would, greet a lot of the members. And oftentimes they would ask her about her family, how her children were doing. And as a proud mom, she would always talk about how she was going to have one of her sons graduate from high school and was going to be the first in the family to not only do that, but go to college as well. And this one time she got an email address from one of the members who was like, oh, really? Wow. Well, let me write down my email address on this piece of paper and you take it home to your son and you tell him to email me. And I remember my mom used to work 12-hour shifts, and she comes home really late at night, like 11 p.m. or even past that. And we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, so she had to go through the bedroom in order to grab her clothes to change into. But she barges into the room and she's like, George, I have something for you. And she was super excited. And she hands me this piece of paper and it's just a random email address. And I'm like, oh, thanks. What am I supposed to do with this? And she's like, one of the members, I told them about you, that you're going to graduate high school soon, and he wants to mentor you. And so, as any diligent student would do, the next day, I immediately drafted an email. I sent it over. The member responded, and he was like, yes, I want to meet you. I want to hear all about you. And so he actually is an executive at Morgan Stanley here in San Francisco. And, what ended up happening is we had a series of exchange of emails, and then he ended up inviting me over to his house. I went to his house, we hit it off. And right then and there, he told me that he was going to offer me an internship. The one thing was that he felt like I wasn't ready yet because I was just about to graduate high school. And so what ended up happening is that I kept developing that relationship with him through email, through text message, and I just knew that it was going to be really important. And so I ended up meeting with him at his house again 2 years later, and we talked for an hour or so, and then he just hits me with, I think you're ready. You've taken some college courses, you have some knowledge under your belt, and we're going to see what we can do to have you intern at Morgan Stanley doing private wealth management.
That's a great story. Can you think of one or two things that you learned doing that internship? Not skills specifically, but kind of that made you more worldly or more able to network or more able to figure out what it was you wanted to do. What did you take from that internship that helped you as you went along?
I think one of the main things that I took away from that internship was, one, being in a business environment. I learned so much jargon, I think, that they use in business. And I learned a lot about financial wealth management. I even learned about ways that I could invest myself, right? I was a first generation, my parents were immigrants. They had really not much of an idea of how to navigate even the financial system in this country. And just being around people who do that every day, they were able to provide me with really practical tips on how to manage my own money and how to grow wealth, which was really, really impactful.
Very cool.
Those are amazing lessons. Like, that story is incredible. Just the fact you were able to network and get those opportunities and how it got you to where you're at right now is just so amazing to hear. And especially a lot of the listeners are just going to love hearing that, and just that they have a chance too. And kind of going off of what Diana's last question was about, like a previous post that you've had, I have a question about another post, actually, being hesitant and fearful as a first generation student, like getting a lot of the opportunities or reaching out to people, asking for help and feeling ashamed of it because of where you come from. How do you feel like you've personally gotten over that? And what experiences did you face that helped you get more confident in asking for help?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. I think for me, it wasn't necessarily a particular moment, but just as I, went through college and, had internships, I think one of the things I realized was that the worst answer you can get is no, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's not the right time. So when I would reach out to people, I just wouldn't put too much pressure on it in my mind that, they were going to say yes or they had to say yes. It was more so I'm going to just shoot my shot and see what happens. And if they say no, then I'll just move on to the next. But it is something that is really difficult, I think, for first generation students, because you just, no one else that perhaps has ever reached out to someone cold. But I think you just have to try it, and if you don't try it, then you'll never know what the answer could have been.
Exactly. That's such a great answer with that. Just learning that the worst thing you can hear is no. And thank you for sharing that information, because a lot of us need that reminder sometimes that it's okay to ask for help sometimes, But going off of that a little bit, personal branding comes really important with how you talk to people and just what you symbolize and what you want to communicate to other people. So why do you find personal branding important, and how did you grow your own personal brand?
Personal branding is incredibly important because it's really the way that you present yourself out to the world, right? Like, what are the things that you want to be known for, right? What are your values? What are the actions that you are taking in order to be known as, someone within marketing or a student that's interested in marketing opportunities? I think for one, it's really important to have an objective, something that you want to get to. And so when I was in college, my objective was I wanted to be known as a first generation student who was incredibly ambitious and was seeking opportunities in business and or marketing. And so it was about thinking about, what are the things that are going to get me there? How am I going to stand out in people's mind, especially with the fact that I was competing against hundreds and thousands of people for the same internship positions. How can I leverage who I am and what I bring to the table via a personal brand? And so what I did was that I formed, a network, whether it was through members at, my mom's job or, through the career center, just making sure that I was leveraging every single opportunity and resource in order to build a network within business, a network within marketing, and also just not saying no to interesting opportunities. So there was a point within my college career in which I took up some emceeing gigs, but it wasn't just like random party gigs. It was more so banquets where they were going to be fundraising. And those were all things that in a way, they kind of seem random, but they were things that I was able to talk about in future internship interviews or job interviews of saying, I understand what it takes to raise money. And I know that in a business environment for companies, you all need to raise money as well. So it was about taking really interesting opportunities, building a network, and really being clear on what your end goal is.
What does it mean really to work in branding, and like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? And what's the difference between working in branding and working in marketing, for instance?
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I think one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is that marketing is just like advertising. And within marketing, there's so many different, like there's so many different, I guess, sectors, or within marketing, there's so many different sectors. So it could be digital marketing, it could be advertising, it could be branding. For me, what we do on a day-to-day basis at 21st Century Brand is that we help companies essentially establish their own personal brand is what it would be for a person, but their own branding, right? What do they want to be known for in the hearts and minds of their communities, whether that is their consumers, whether that is their investors, whether that is their employees. And it's, on a day-to-day, we're constantly doing exercises with our clients in order to help them figure out what their ambitions are, who they want to target, what is their end goal, what is the most important thing to them, like who is the audience that they want to go after. And yeah, we're helping them rebrand.
Things at work don't always go well.
Yeah.
So you've had a lot of success as a young person, but I think it's informative to hear sort of anecdotes about a time when something went off the rails and then how you were able to kind of bring it back. So maybe you have an example from this job where something didn't go well.
Yes. So I think for one, nothing has gone terribly wrong in my job, luckily, but I think there's been a lot of challenges, especially being someone who is first generation, who hasn't had that type of help via family or just other support. I'm really the first one to kind of go through a lot of these things. I think even at my job, the position that I got after I was an intern was a position that I co-created with my manager at that point. And so it was the first time that position had been created, which is business development associate. And so it was a lot of trial and error. I was going into a job in which I had very limited knowledge about branding, limited knowledge about business development, and just limited knowledge about, the industry as a whole. And so the way that I approached that was that I just tried to educate myself on my own time as much as I could, whether it was, listening to different podcasts that were informative and were industry based, or reading articles, or even just saying, hey, to my manager, can we just have a 1-hour coffee chat? I need to ask you a lot of these questions, really humanizing who I was working with. Because I think a lot of times when we think of, oh, I'm working with a manager level, an executive level, a director level, a CEO level, sometimes it feels very intimidating, but just remembering that they're humans and, they want to help. The company's success is their success. And so, that's how I approached it. Just looking through a ton of resources, but also leveraging the people that were around me.
Very smart. So can you tell me a little bit about what it means to work in branding, and specifically, in the job as program manager? Like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? And what's the difference between working in marketing and working in branding?
Yes, I actually really love my job as a program manager. And the best way that I can describe it is being like air traffic control at an airport. As you know, we work with many incredible brands. And so as a project manager, at any given moment, I'm managing around 3 to 4 different teams, each with their own set of people, each with their own timeline, each with their own set of milestones and deliverables. And so it's a really interesting job where I'm not only part of the back end, making sure that things are going on time, that I'm managing any risks, any delays, but it's also a great job because I get to have because I also get to have a lot of client-facing time. So I get to speak with the client, whether that is a CMO or it's another program manager or it's a director of marketing. So it's a really, really exciting job where you can balance a little bit of both working and meeting external partners, but also working individually and by yourself. And so for me, working in marketing and branding is a little bit different, right, than working in business, because branding is really about what is the idea that our client, which is a brand, wants to create in the hearts and minds of their communities, that be their consumers, that be their investors, that be their shareholders, that be anyone that interacts with the brand. So it's really exciting work and it's very creative.
Going off of a little different tangent, I had a question because we noticed that you went viral on TikTok about a mouthwash recently, and last week I
Oh
think
my
you also went viral too. If you
Not the
could give some
mouthwash.
if you could give some, like, backstory, context to it, what you enjoyed, because I know in the beginning of the rapid fire, you said you're really good at editing and TikToks and things like that, so we just wanted a small little funny tidbit, asking a little bit more context about it.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny that you bring the mouthwash up. It's like it's the one thing that like it's hilarious because when we meet new clients and if I'm on those calls, they'll be like, "Oh, and this is George Peraza-Vasquez. He's a TikTok influencer." And I'm like, "No, it just happened one time. I went viral one time back in 2020. So that's hilarious. Yeah, I mean that video was kind of random. I had tried a mouthwash that I really enjoyed and made a video on it, just kind of did a funny take on it, and it just went completely viral. I think it has 2.5 million views right now. And the company ended up sending me a year's worth of product. So the video was me going to Target and just kind of recounting how I picked up this mouthwash and that it had a claim that it would eliminate morning breath, and that I was going to try it out. And so I basically in the video, I take it home, I try it out, and I just kind of give it a thumbs up rating. But like people just like it just went extremely viral. Nothing that I could have predicted. And yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, Jaylani, a lot of things have changed since then. Now the videos that I'm going viral for are like my story on being first generation, being Latino, being the first in the family to go and graduate from a university and working in corporate. So things have definitely changed, but I'm just having fun with it.
I think it's just so funny that you probably didn't expect it to go viral like that, but just the fact that your story is also getting out there, it's just a win-win in that situation too, and that you've got all that
I mean, hey.
mouthwash to have now. You have a life's worth now.
Hi.
I gave it away though. I was nice and I gave it away to friends and family.
Perfect.
Oh, that's nice. As our last question, we always like to ask this at the end with all of our people that we talk to. It's just a funny question that we think learns a lot about you, but we wanted to ask, if you could choose one superpower to boost yourself at work and all your skills at work, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. One superpower, I think I would boost my emotional intelligence. I think it's really important to understand the different types of people that you work with, right? Like, what are the things that make them excited? What are the things that make them not excited, right? And I just think, from my experience, the leaders who have been the best and who I've had really great experiences with are leaders with high emotional intelligence, who really understand you and see you as a human and see you as someone who they can pour into. So that would be my superpower. Really high emotional intelligence.
That's an awesome answer. We haven't heard that one yet, so that's very unique. And your rapid questions are really cool too. So just again, thank you so much for talking with us today. We learned so much about you and your experiences, and just being able to share that with people who are listening is such a powerful message. So we just wanted to thank you for coming on today and talking with us.
Yeah, and thank you both. Thank you so much for having me.
Ditto that. Very nice to talk to you.